Okay, thanks, Hebe. So let's get started. Welcome to another week of the reading group class. Today we're going to be talking about voting. Hello guys. What's up? So today we're going to be talking about the important topic of voting. And here are some of the discussion questions we're going to go so yeah, as usual, I think there's going to be a lot of room for you guys to talk about to take a position on some of the issues related to voting that are quite relevant to today's society. Looking forward to those. I think what we'll start with is just a quick definition of voting, and then we can talk about the importance and significance of voting in our society today. So if anyone wants to take a shot at defining what is voting? What do they think? What do you guys think voting is? Okay. Annabella, what do you think?
Picking out someone to kind of look over the country.
Okay, yeah. So I would say in a political context, yes, that would be voting is essentially given the option of giving people the option to choose who to select for who to lead the country, right? Or maybe it doesn't even have to be a full country. It could be a specific city. It could be a region, like province, for example. So voting happens on many different levels. But I want to kind of even go more general, just in political context. How would we define voting just in general? Just the definition of the word by itself. Anyone? Alina, what do you think?
What was the question again?
So just in your own words, how would you define the term voting?
As giving ballots to someone or something to show what thing or person everyone in a certain group likes.
Mhm. Okay. So giving everyone a ballot, so giving everyone the choice to choose what thing or person they prefer the most in a situation. I think this gets closest to like the most general definition of voting, right? So it can be a process that's as simple as saying like you're hanging out with your group of friends and you're trying to decide where to go get dinner, right? Maybe the system of voting that you guys might devise is like, okay, here are the three restaurants. We can go to a burger restaurant, we can go to a fish and chips restaurant, or go to an Italian restaurant. And then everyone selects the restaurant that they prefer the most, right? So that would be at its simplest form, a form of voting, right? Everyone selecting the preference that they like the most, right? The choice that they prefer the most. Um, and then in society, of course, we also formalize the system of voting through various institutions. But one such institutions are elections, right? So I think this is kind of what Annabelle was getting at earlier. Elections are useful because in a democratic system, we need a way to select who leads our country. Okay. So I hope that kind of clears up what voting is definitionally. Let's talk about the significance of voting. Why do you guys think voting is really important in society? Like, why, or maybe like if I were to pose the question, why don't we just like force everyone to follow a certain decision? Why do we allow people to choose using, a voting system, the thing that they want, like or prefer the most? Alina, go ahead.
If you don't let people have a voice, they eventually get bored of the system where just one person is in charge and they will eventually revolt. And voting is a really great option to get everyone's this idea subject because everyone is allowed to vote, unlike like a lot of other things like posting up for like a form or something digitally or like passing something to neighborhood because voting gives everyone a chance to express what they.
Yeah. I think kind of at the end there. Okay, actually, I don't know. Is my internet that's it's not working right now, or are you speaking right now, Lena? Because I see that. Okay, you're not. Okay, I was a bit confused because you were still on mute there, but yeah, exactly. I think the most important thing is that, giving everyone the voice or the opportunity to, express what they like, what their preferences are, right? And I think this is important on kind of like for fairness, right? I think, I think all of you guys would agree that everyone, if we assume everyone kind of has equal rights in society, right, then everyone should have a say, have a chance to influence decisions that are actually being made. So on a fairness level, I think it's quite important for us to have systems of voting in society in things like choosing who's leading our country. Anyone think of any other reasons why voting would be important? And so I think another interesting question that I think might hint at, and the answer to my question is, with voting, while with voting, many people can have their voices and their ideas heard. Why, what is different between that and a single person or a single group making decisions in our society? Bessie, what do you think?
Uh, like different demographics, it'd be important for them to like vote and get their opinions. And in voting, gets a lot of opinions from a lot of different people.
Yeah, for sure. So different demographics, and I really like that point. Um, if we could maybe take that even a bit further, what are different about different demographics and the way they think or the things they care about or that they're likely to care about when they, what are those differences? Hebe, what do you think?
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, so Bessie mentioned how different demographics, when you have voting, they can have their different voices heard. What is different about, the voices, or I guess the opinions or the ways in which these different demographics think?
Um, like they were raised under as different like cultures, like as the world changes, so do the I guess the general like outlook of people. Like you see lots of I guess like differences or between like boomers and like millennials and then like Gen Z. Like they all grew up differently and so they have different opinions based on how they were raised.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example. So talking about the divide between different generations, between age, and this is just one aspect of demographics, but I think even this in itself is quite significant, right? So kind of like the ideas or the values that a baby boomer might have, so someone born after the World War, the Second World War, right, versus someone who's a Gen X or Gen Y or even a Gen Z person might have, maybe completely different, right? Because they've grown up in different environments, they've grown up in different times, the social, the cultural norms are completely different. And so the ways they're likely to be shaped by that also changes the way what they think about, right? And what they care about most in society. So why then do we have voting as a system? It's to aggregate, or it's to kind of like find the average of all of those different preferences from all those different ages, right? And to kind of then allow us to pick someone that might be able to best represent, or at least most accurately represent the desire or balance the desires, right? The wants and the needs of all of those people in society. Um, so, and again, age isn't just the only factor. We could have a whole discussion on all of the other demographic, the social, cultural difference between the behavioral differences between people. But voting is just a way for us to kind of find a good compromise or middle ground between people, all sorts of different people. Um, and so we'll talk about this later, but there are many systems of voting, some of which are better at doing this than others. And there's like both drawbacks and benefits to different systems of voting. This is why I think this is a really fascinating topic and something that's really important that we should care about, right? Especially once you guys get older, you will definitely also have the ability. Okay. Here's a question in terms of voting. What do these three pictures have in common? Okay, so I think there are two answers here. One of them more directly relates to the topic at hand today. Hugh, what do you think?
These are world leaders, but are they like not democratically elected world leaders?
Yeah, exactly. So these are world leaders that are dictators, essentially. So they weren't elected through a voting system, and the ways in which they came to power necessarily to govern the country were through undemocratic means. So it might have been through the family line that they've inherited kind of the position from their parents. Parents were leaders, it might have been through military force. So they overthrew the previous government and established themselves through violence. Right? It could be power or corruption. But regardless, these are dictators. These are people that were voted in that now lead entire countries, entire parts of the world. Millions of people literally live under the control and the rule of these people that seemingly had no justification for being there other than, well, they just put themselves in a position of power. And why do you guys think we are talking about these reasons? What does this suggest about the importance of voting, knowing the current state of the leaders in these three countries? What does this suggest about the importance of voting? Grace, I know you just joined, but do you have a thought on this?
What?
On the question I just asked?
I don't really know.
Okay, let me put it in another way. I guess a simpler question is, would you rather live in a world or in a country where leaders were voted in, or a country where leaders were not voted in, or just chosen because of their past history or something?
I would choose the first option.
Okay. And why would you pick the first option?
Wait, I don't really remember the first option. What was it?
So the first option is you obviously you prefer living in a country where the leader is chosen through votes, right? That's what you said,
Yes.
right? Why?
Um, that's a bit hard to explain. I don't really know why.
Well, in our current country, in Canada, do we elect our leaders? Do we vote in our leaders?
Yes.
So why would you prefer to live in a country like Canada compared to, let's say, a country like North Korea, where the leader is a dictator?
It's because like sometimes if it's only like dictatorship, they can do like really bad things and like maybe the country might not be free like North Korea. Instead, like Canada, like we vote for our leaders, so like we could we can like use like we can have our own opinion on things if they're and like we choose somebody to trust to make sure like we're like Canada is always in peace and things.
Okay, yeah, I like that explanation. Annabella, did you have your hand up?
I feel like a big factor of it is to ensure the population's like happiness, because like when you're calculating like a country's um like when you're considering a country, like in many places in geography, you often have to like calculate how happy they are with the decisions. So I feel like that plays a big factor.
Mhm. Okay, I think both of you are getting at the right kind of point here, which is that with voting, one of the benefits of living in a country where you vote in the leader is more likely to represent the interests and the wants and the needs of the citizens, right? Because the citizens are going to vote, they have the choice to select from a variety of different leaders, and they're going to choose the one that is able to best meet the needs that they have, right? Whereas for a dictator, there's just one person who could literally be really, really good at what they're doing or really, really bad at what they're doing. They might like certain groups of people living in the country. They might not like certain groups of people living in the country. But because there's no choice for you to select the one that best represents you, that leader could end up doing really bad things, right? They could take away your human rights or your freedoms. And that's what we've seen in Korea. Um, and the other thing I think Grace kind of touches on here is like, what if you have a really, really bad leader, right? Even in a democracy like in Canada, the benefit of voting and the importance of voting is that you're able to replace that leader. You're able to kick out that leader in the next election and select a better leader that isn't as bad. Whereas in a dictatorship, if the dictator is doing really bad stuff, like not feeding their citizens, or being really corrupt and wasting all the country's money, their budget on like fancy cars and like mansions, it's like the citizens can't do anything. They can't vote them out, right? They have no power to control what the leader is doing. So the second reason why voting is really important is we want to be able to control who is leading a country, who is in power, so that they don't do really, really bad stuff, right? That harms us. So I know all of this sounds a bit abstract, but like just think about how this would apply in Canada, right? If our current leader, Justin Trudeau, was just able to get away with spending millions of dollars buying stuff for his personal life, or, not providing not investing money into like building hospitals or schools or bridges for the country, right? Um, and you can't really do anything about that. I think as a citizen, we would be really upset with that. And also, we probably not be living such good lives if that's the case. So again, this is why it's quite important in society. Okay, so I want us to do a bit of a research activity to familiarize ourselves with how voting works for people. Um, so from what we've discussed so far, our conception of voting is really simple. It's just that everyone in a country, they're equal, so they all get one vote, and they kind of select whoever they want to lead the country, and someone gets elected. We don't know how, right? So there are many different voting systems across the world, and the ones that countries use vary based on the region, based on geography. So Canada's voting system, for example, is a lot more different than France's voting system, or even Germany's voting system, or Japan's voting system. So I want you guys to kind of take a global perspective on this, and you guys are each gonna research one of these voting systems, and you come back and explain it to the rest of the class. Okay? So I'll just assign you guys to this. Okay. Should I type it out in chat? Would that be easier for you guys if I typed it out in chat? Okay. Sounds good. I'm gonna put it in chat. So there, just randomly assign you guys to these voting systems, and then what I want you guys to do, you can use the internet, you can use AI if you want. Is just understand what the voting system, how the voting system works, right? How does it select a leader, right? For a country. What is one country that uses that voting system? Okay, so I want a real world country, real world example. And then I want you guys, if you have time also, you can find out one benefit. So one way the voting system is good at selecting leaders, and then one way the disadvantage. So one way there's kind of a flaw in the way the system selects the leaders of the country. Okay, so you guys can get started on that, and we'll come back in 5 minutes. If anyone has any questions, just put in the chat. Okay. Also, iPhone 10, I don't know who you are. Can you rename yourself to your actual name, please? Okay, they just left. guys, so that's about 5 minutes. I don't see any questions in chat, so I assume everyone's able to kind of do their research successfully. Let's start with plurality. So, Annabella, you can start us off when you follow.
Okay, so it's basically a voting system that focuses on like the most popular. So it's basically like a popularity contest. So like one example is like basically everyone votes for their like favorite candidate, and then so like basically the candidate with the most vote wins, even if they don't get more than half of the votes. So like it's not like a majority of the voting system. And then one benefit is that basically a lot of the like it's more easier to host, because like even like if the person doesn't get the majority, you technically still have a winner. But then one a con of this is that if you're like hosting something, and then it's not what the majority wants, so like maybe like let's say that there's this person that got 20 votes, and that's only like 20% of the people. But then no, like 20 let's say 20 votes, but then that might not be the majority, so like the majority might not be happy with that person.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a really simple voting system, but I think you explained it very well, Annabella. And then we can say like an example of this is in Canada. So in Canada, we have first past the post system, which is just another word for the plurality voting system. What this means is that in any riding in Canada, for example, the candidate, so this can be the member of parliament if we're talking about the provincial election, or the member of provincial, or that. I mean, the member of parliament if we're talking about the federal election, or the member of provincial parliament if we're talking about provincial election, the party whose candidate gets the most votes, not a majority, the most votes, wins that entire riding. They win the entire region. Um, so obviously this is easy to hold a vote compared to other voting systems, right? But the problem is this means like let's say a candidate gets 30% of the votes, and though they don't get a majority, it's still greater than all the other candidates' votes. A candidate still gets elected, and this means that 70% of the people in that region, in that riding, don't actually support the candidate, or they would have preferred another candidate to be elected. So this is a very common criticism. We'll see with other voting systems how they try to address this flaw. So the next type of voting system we talked about was ranked choice voting. So Bessie, do you want to explain this to us?
It's when there's like a list of candidates and voters get to assign a rank to each of them based on how much they want them to be in office. Like 1, 2, 3, and then they would like circle or like write down their top 3 options, 1, 2, 3, and used. It's not used very often. It's only used in like some cities, some counties in America. It was like used in Slovenia once. It's generally not very widespread. Um, a pro of it is that like people get to see like who has the strongest supports, so people can see how much people want one specific person in office. But a con of it is that it's like really complicated and hard to implement, and there's like also some it just there's just a lot of complications in putting it in place.
Okay, it's a complicated system. Okay, so yeah, essentially, um, this is a system where you are given ballots where you can actually rank the choices of the candidates that are on the ballot. right? So different than plurality. Plurality voting, you just pick the candidate that you like, but that doesn't represent, how much or how little you dislike the other candidate's comparison to that top candidate, right? So let's say, for example, in plurality voting, you really, really like you as a voter. You might really, really like one specific candidate. That candidate's not very popular, right? Maybe they're a candidate from a smaller political party, and you think they might not be able to win. Well, uh, well, then you might instead vote for another candidate that's more popular, right? Because it ends up being a popularity contest, and you just have to end up voting for the one maybe you don't like as much, but you think that they have the best shot of winning. So that's a problem with the plurality system voting, but with ranked choice voting, you don't get the same problem. The reason you don't get the same problem is that you can now rank your votes, the candidates on a relative scale based on how much you like them. So that one first candidate that you really, really like a lot, right? Maybe they're the ones that you you relate to the most. You can give them a one without having to, worry too much of what happens if they don't get elected. Because if they don't get elected, then instead your vote will count towards the second your second favorite candidate, and that candidate might be the one that you maybe not you don't like as much, but you still think that they're a good candidate. They could be still a good leader for the country, all the way down to the 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever candidate. So in this way, ranked choice voting captures voters' preferences more uh, uh, accurately. So people aren't afraid to vote for smaller candidates or candidates that they think may not be as popular, because in the end, they could still have that choice heard while still having the chance to elect a more popular candidate at the same time. Hopefully that kind of explanation helps make sense. Okay, next let's move on to proportional. Wait. Uh, Actually, no. I think, Alina, I asked you to do the runoff system. You want to explain that too?
So the runoff system is not really commonly used just for regular election. It's when the plurality election doesn't go perfectly as planned, and none of the candidates get more than 50%. They choose the two top ranking candidates, and they put them one-on-one on a vote, and the one that gets the most votes automatically wins. A benefit is that this can create a really accurate description of who's going to be the best candidate, because people only have two choices, and you can make people choose between whether they want this one or this one. But between if it's a lot of people being chosen, it's harder for someone to choose. But if it's just two options, it's easier. And a drawback is that a lot of people might not choose to vote if they only see that is two candidates, and this leads to an inaccurate number.
Oh, no. Yeah. So in a runoff system, it's basically when neither candidate gets a majority, or no one candidate gets a majority in a plurality election. So obviously there's more than two candidates, right? Because if there were only two candidates, then like 99.9% of the time someone will get a majority. Let's say there are three candidates running, and one of the candidate gets like maybe 20% of the votes, and then splits the votes for the other two candidates such that no candidate gets a majority. Then you have the runoff system, which you eliminate kind of the weakest, like the candidate with the least amount of votes, and then you finally just pit like the top two against each other. This forces the voters to select the majority, which can be helpful to kind of break these kind of deadlocks or like ties you might usually see with plurality voting, right? When you just pick the candidate with 40% support. Well, with runoff system, we can hold another vote and ensure that the candidate selected at least has 50% of the population support, which is better representation. However, I think the criticism that you mentioned is good because people might not vote if it's just two candidates, right? Again, for the same reason we talked about earlier with plurality voting, maybe neither of those candidates really appeal to you, so you just don't vote at all. And that might lead to the an inaccurate number of people who truly believe that this is the best candidate for us, right? So that's a drawback. Okay, good. We have two more to go through. Next up is proportional representation. So Grace, do you want to explain to us?
I didn't get to do much research on it, but a proportional representation, it gives candidates or parties representation on like elective bodies and in proportion to the votes they receive. It also may be used to mean like fair representation by population, like applied to states or regions. It's used proportional representations have been used in many countries. For example, Sweden and Greece. Yeah, there's like more than like 7 countries that use this type of voting. And one of the benefits is that proportional representation ensures like minority groups like a measure of representation proportionate to their electoral support.
You have a drawback? system.
I didn't really get time to search that.
Okay, fair enough. So, yeah, I mean, this is good. Proportional representation is different than plurality representation. Plurality representation, plurality elections, right? Basically, if you don't win the election in plurality system, you don't get anything in return. Even if you got some percentage of the votes, if you're a losing party, you get nothing. That's why plurality systems are known as winner-take-all systems. And obviously, the flaw here is, well, if 20% of the population voted for the party or the candidate that came in second, why shouldn't that be reflected at all in the results of the election? Why does only the winner get the one seat, right? So proportional representation aims to address this flaw because the way proportional representation works, like let's say on a countrywide level, is that every citizen votes for a specific party, right? Whichever party, whichever person or candidate that they think best represents them. And then based on the total votes for each party, that party will get a certain amount of people, of representatives, right? So kind of like all these representatives then get like a voice in deciding what things get done in a country, right? So these are kind of like all mini leaders of the country in themselves. So if you got 20% of if your party got 20% of the vote under proportional representation, what that means is, and let's say, the parliament, there's space for 200 of these leaders, you get 20% times 200 of those leaders be from that one party. Okay, so it's proportional. It's the same ratio to the amount of percentage of votes that they receive as a party. And the benefit here is this means that, maybe smaller groups that want to have a place in leadership, even if they don't always win every single election 100% of the time, they will still be fairly represented. They'll still have a small percentage of a voice in whatever decision making of the country, essentially. The drawback, however, of this, of course, is if there are like many different groups that all now have voices, all now have abilities to vote on what decisions are made in the country, there can be potential for a lot of conflict and disagreements, right? Compared to a plurality voting system where you just select the strongest party, right? The strongest leader. So that one leader just gets to make the decisions once they get elected. In a proportional system, because there's so many different viewpoints that have to constantly be balanced in the decision-making process, because it takes longer for people to agree on things before actually things get done. That's a main drawback of the proportional representation system. Okay, thanks, Grace. Finally, we'll finish off with the single transferable vote system. So Hebe, you can explain stuff.
Okay, single transferable voting is where you have one ballot and one vote to cast, but you have the ability to rank the candidates on your ballot. So if your top choice is eliminated or has already been voted into office, then your vote will go to your next top choice. A country that uses this voting system is Australia, and they use it to elect certain members of parliament, as well as in other jurisdictions. An advantage of the system is that it saves your votes. So if your top choice candidate has already gotten elected, then your vote goes towards someone else that you would like to see elected rather than just being wasted. But a disadvantage is that this system can be complicated and hard to understand for voters. Since the ballots are not uniform across the world and can be unclear in their instruction, voters may rank only the candidates from their favorite party, or rank too few and their vote will be exhausted, or they will bullet vote, which is vote only for their top choice in each party.
Yeah, excellent. So this is, well, again, pretty similar to the idea of ranked choice voting, except it also combines elements of proportional representation. So it's kind of like taking the best out of both worlds, I would say. Let's say there's a region where you have a single transferable voting system and you can elect up to 3 candidates. There are 10 candidates available. And instead of just saying, well, let's just select the top three, let's just, select the candidates that get the 3 highest percentages votes. That would be plurality voting system. We are going to have a ranked choice where each individual can order the candidates by how much they like them, all the way from first to 10th place. Okay, and then and then you start counting by the candidates that got the most first place votes, right? So then that would be the first candidate we elect. And then all of then that candidate's votes would in the second round get transferred onto the next candidate, the one that ranked one lower than that candidate. So if you had ranked the candidate A who now gets elected as your first pick, well then now your first pick goes into candidate B, right? Who you ranked previously as second, but now they get promoted to first because your candidate A already got elected. And then this process just continues until you select the needed amount of candidates. So again, it's ranked choice voting, but in a system where you need to elect multiple members to represent a specific regional area. And again, that means you get all the benefits of like better representation and things like that. You don't have people just, oh, I guess I'll vote for the most popular candidate because they're the only ones that can possibly get elected in this situation. I'm not going to actually vote for the candidate I care about the most. It gives voters more options in that way. So that's why this is good. Okay, great work, everyone. Some really good research being done here. So, okay, I mean, I already talked about this, but we use plurality voting, first past the post system. You guys can do a bit more research on that. Or you'll probably also talk about it in your like grade 10 civics class we end up taking. Okay, let's quickly have a discussion on some other important topics. One topic that I think is really hotly discussed all the time is about the issue of voting age. So first of all, anyone know the voting age in Canada? What's the voting age in Canada, guys? Lena, go ahead.
I think I remember it was 18 or 16.
Yeah, so I mean, the voting age in Canada is 18. Actually, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's 18. If someone wants to correct me in case I'm wrong, yeah, feel free to like do some research and tell me I'm wrong. I think it's 18 years old. Um, and you know, this of course is also compared to often cited as the age of majority, right? The age when you're legally considered an adult. And so there are greater responsibilities that you have and there greater kind of legal accountability for your actions. So one may argue that that is predominantly the reason for why our voting age is arbitrarily set at 18 in Canada is because, well, the moment you are now recognized as an adult, as someone of an age of a majority, right, you should now have the responsibility and the duty to vote and to select the leader of your country. So, again, this is just an argument for why the voting age is where it is. However, um, I think we should have a discussion on what do you guys think about this. So, do you guys think the voting age at 18 is fine where it is, or do you think you should be lower or higher? Annabella, what do you think?
Okay, so my opinion on this is that it actually should be lower because mainly I feel like this it's because like right now I'm having like civics and careers. So like they talk a lot about like Canada, like the system, like voting age, but then like we don't really get to like experience it. So like while like so like if we were to be able to experience it while the voting happens, I think that we would be more independent and responsible in the future because we already like kind of get like a hint on how to like how it works.
Okay, I think I see what you're saying. So, if we lower the voting age, this will incentivize younger citizens to care more about politics, to care more about issues that are affecting their country. And then this means when they're exposed to these sorts of, when they want to become more involved in these sorts of issues at a younger age, this means as they grow older, they will become more informed, more intelligent voters, and that's a good thing. Okay, good. Anyone else have a differing opinion or a different idea? Annabella?
Okay, another reason why I think it should be like more younger, it's because like it isn't doing the society any harm by making it younger, like right? Because like the people who like uh won't vote, like the people who the community might have a bad impression on, they might not even care. So like it doesn't really affect, since it doesn't really affect them, so they wouldn't really have the time to vote. While the people who actually care about this community and like does a lot of clubs like Model UN, they will actually try and like contribute to the society, therefore making more votes so that it represents the majority.
Hey, yeah, for sure. So people who really, really want to vote, especially those younger people, it's better that we give them that option because people who don't care about voting are not going to vote anyways. So it doesn't really, like, you're not really going to get worse voting as a pattern of this. You're just going to get more informed and more accurate votes, which isn't that good for democracy. Like, so I understand the argument. Aline,
So I think the voting age should be the same as right now for many reasons. First of all, 18 is when you become an adult, and that is because for a lot of scientific reasons, because it's really when your brain finishes developing from its childhood stage. And when you're younger, you can be easily influenced by those around. If your teacher were to say that chili peppers are the best food in the world, a loyal student in his or her class might just take on the same point of view as the teacher. And if it was lowered, a lot of kids would probably be easily swayed by the people around them to make a decision that, if they were to think about it when they were older, would be a bad decision. And even teenagers now, they might vote for the person that might just give them a better student loan rate, or might increase their salaries. a lot of adults might consider other points like overall like the economy, or they might consider pollution, as as these things are not something that kids consider. And considering Annabella's point that children do have a lot of chances to interact with the world's voting systems by watching the voting, and will just have their parents choose the right candidate. And a lot of teachers might assign assignments like making your own speech to convince, or holding a election in your class to choose a class president. And those using voting in the real world. So it's, and a lot of children, they'll this like the amount of children in the world, like it could change the voting scores dramatically, because like too much children voting for like the same candidate, like maybe they promised them candy, like it would be the best for the whole country. And because children usually have a more narrow.
Okay, yeah. So really, really great point there, Linda. I think if I could summarize kind of your points, it's that there are just reasons for why older people are like the current age at 18 adults. These voters are more likely to make rational and well thought decisions when they're voting, whereas younger, like 16-year-olds, they're still considered children legally. They may not have as much experience, and that prevents in life, and that prevents them from being able to make the best or most informed decisions on a lot of important voting issues like taxes, for example. And then you also say that there are other ways for them to be engaged in politics that don't necessarily mean giving them the power to vote. These are all really, really strong and compelling reasons for why we should keep the voting age free up. Okay, anyone else want to give their opinion on this? If not, I think we might move on and try to wrap this up. Okay, well, I'm not going to go super into depth into this, but there is a case study which is in Austria where they did lower the voting age to 16. You guys can kind of read it through what it says, but you know, it's a lot of complex like statistics and things like that because they did an actual study over like a decade, so 10 years. What they found is that there was higher turnout and trust in the political system. Um, this is kind of to be expected. I think young people are the most likely to be involved in politics, given that they have the most access to information through technology and things like that, but also because there are a lot of political issues that do affect younger people to a greater and disproportionate amount. Things like climate change, which young people care about more. So more of them are likely to come out into the election to actually vote when you give them the opportunity to vote. Now, a really interesting thing you can think about this is to ask yourself, would this result occur in every single other country where you lower the voting age to 16? Or is this something that might only be specifically exclusive to Austria? Because in Austria, Austria is a European, it's a very, very wealthy, relatively developed, relatively progressive European country. So, maybe this might have worked in Austria where you would have gotten greater turnout and more trust in the political system. But another country where it's implemented, that might not be the case. So I encourage you guys to think critically about this case study and whether it does definitively prove should lower the voting age or not. Other topics that we were going to talk about: mandatory voting, so a system where everyone is legally required to vote or face some sort of punishment if they do not vote. And then talking about the role of media in influencing how people decide, make voting decisions. And there is a lot of talk about this during the 2016 United States election between Trump and Clinton, for example. And then more recently, the 2019/2021 Canadian election was some talks about interference from foreign powers. Final question we're going to discuss is what are some ways we can fight against the media's negative influence in the ways it changes how people vote. So again, I think all really, really interesting questions. I will be posting this onto the Google Classroom if you guys want to take a look at that and ponder it a bit further. But given the time right? And the constraints on that. I think we will just kind of end it off here for the points. So we're also going to talk about polarization, but that's, I think, a lesson for another. So yeah, thank you guys for coming to today's meeting class. Thank you for your participation and volunteering in our discussion questions. If you guys don't have any other questions, you're feel free to go. Or if you do have any questions about today's class, you know, anything in general you want to ask me, you can stick around.